Hi everybody, what's up? Let's talk about problems and solutions. And I live in a small town. There's about 8,000 people here, and the roads, for the most part, are fairly clear. If I had my camera on while driving around, you'd see, consider 2 or 3 cars rush hour. It's very quiet, and so normally you can take your time driving, and if you do the speed limit, it's no big deal because no one's gonna. There's really no road ragers around here. So, anyways, I was going up a main street and this guy pulls out in front of me, and I thought, okay, no big deal. He was older, he was short, he wasn't too much higher than the wheel. And so some of the roads here are 25 and some are 35, and then it proceeds to 45, and he couldn't keep up. He was going about 10 under the speed limit and couldn't maintain his lane. So I thought, he's really either old or he's under the influence. And in our small town, we have a couple of cops, so I called our local police department and I said, I'm behind someone and I'm really concerned because there are workers, construction guys, and if he swerves because he cannot maintain his lane, I'm worried someone's going to get hurt. So lo and behold, I told them what road I was on, and up behind me comes the cop because they knew exactly where I was, and pulled up in front of me because there was a safe distance and turned their flashers on as the guy proceeded into his neighborhood in this little subdivision. And the older guy didn't stop. I let him go, safe distance. And I saw him, the older guy just wasn't stopping. So I thought, if it's, he's not seeing the lights. So, anyways, I let him go. I drove, and I saw the cop had pulled into this guy's driveway behind the garage. This older guy ended up pulling in his garage, never saw the cops and this and that. And I thought, okay, that's fine, whatever. And so within a couple minutes or so, the cop calls me and he says, is this so and so? And I said, yeah. He goes, you made the call? I said, yeah. And he goes, I'm glad you called. He said, a gentleman's older. He struggles, and his wife was in the passenger seat. And I said, okay. And he says, she's not much better off than him. And I said, all right. And he says, we've had calls about him before. And I said, okay. And he says, can you kind of explain? And I said, well, he couldn't maintain the lane and wasn't even keeping the speed limit. And so I just was worried about the guys working on the road. And he says, well, I have his son's information. He lives in a different state, and I'm going to give him a call because now this is the second call we've had about him, and we're going to have to call the DMV and say it's a medical, that he has to be medically cleared to drive. And I said, well, I understand. My grandma drove till the age of 90 and sideswiped a trailer, and she gave up her license, but I can understand how challenging it is. And so the cop said, well, we're glad you called. And I said, well, I'm retired. So maybe if you can pass on my name and number to them to let them know if they need a ride to the store, I would be willing to step up and help. I said, I know it's hard to give up your independence, but if there's anything I can do. So there was a problem, and I came up with a solution. And I think that's life in general. If you see a situation and someone is clearly, it shouldn't be behind the wheel of a car, you should step in. And I'm not saying you should bail someone out if they choose to drink and drive or be a personal Uber. But if you know someone's older, you can step up and say, you know what, once in a while, if grandma and grandpa need a ride to the store to pick up a prescription or to get some milk, or maybe you could pick it up on their behalf or whatever. So maybe you can help. So, anyways, that was an interesting situation and experience, but I stepped up and did the right thing. So, anyways, that's all I've got, and I will be back.